Welcome to the deep dive. Today, for you, the learner, we are looking at some pretty counterintuitive ideas about what it actually means to be educated.
Right. And it's not just about memorizing facts,
No, not at all. It's about how we interact with the massive amount of information we're exposed to every single day.
which is overwhelming for most of us.
Exactly. So we are drawing from this really fascinating piece of writing by the philosopher Abdul Jabbar Al Waily.
Specifically, his chapter on the philosophy of science.
Yeah, from his book, Thus Spoke Confucius. And this isn't just some dry academic text. It's really a blueprint for the profound architecture of human knowledge.
It really is.
To give you a sense of where we are heading today, we're going to explore why an uneducated Bedouin living a harsh life in the desert might actually possess more true wisdom than a highly credentialed, brilliant scientist.
Which sounds crazy at first.
It does. We'll also look at this really striking metaphor he uses. He compares the human mind to a glass lamp where our everyday emotions act like this thick smoke clouding the glass.
That's a powerful image.
And for anyone navigating today's relentless information age, we will look at why hoarding knowledge without acting on it is likened to a billionaire desperately stuffing money into a mattress while the world outside just starves.
It is a profound framework to explore. All while he really synthesizes these concepts to make a central overriding point
Which is?
that science, philosophy, and morality, they are not isolated subjects meant to be studied in a vacuum. They are the literal soul and body of human civilization.
Soul and body. I like that.
Yeah, in our modern context, where we are just bombarded with relentless data streams and conflicting narratives, information overload is a genuine hazard.
Oh, absolutely.
So the goal of examining this text today is to find those sharp moments of clarity that cut through all that noise. We're looking at how we don't just accumulate facts, but how we are actually supposed to live with them, apply them, and let them shape our worldview.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with a really surprising dynamic Al-Wali sets up regarding the actual parentage of knowledge.
The family tree of ideas.
Right. He looks specifically at the relationship between science and philosophy. He describes philosophy as the master of theoretical sciences.
It's the one in charge.
Yeah, it's painted as this incredibly potent force, one that has the capacity to overturn entire societies, topple thrones, bring down established states. He actually places it second only to prophecy in its sheer weight and influence.
But then he throws a curveball.
He really does. He states that science is actually the father of philosophy. So philosophy is the master, but science is what gave birth to it. How does that family tree actually work?
What's fascinating here is the mechanism of how human inquiry evolves. Philosophy operates on the absolute frontier of human understanding.
Out on the edge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It tackles the massive, unsolved mysteries of an infinite universe. It asks those giant, seemingly unanswerable questions.
Like what?
Like, what is the true connection between the physical body and the intangible soul? Or what are the absolute origins of nature?
Right, things you can't just put in a test tube.
Not initially, no. They completely defy straightforward measurement or empirical testing. They're totally abstract. But the dynamic Al-Waily highlights is that once a philosophical mystery is actually solved,
Once we figure it out.
right, once its underlying codes are cracked, tested, and proven, it graduates.
Graduates. That's an interesting way to put it.
It leaves the speculative realm of philosophy and becomes a rigid science.
So it's a process of transformation. Are there fields we study today that used to just be purely philosophical ponderings?
Absolutely. Think about the study of the human mind. For centuries, understanding human behavior, motivations, consciousness, that was entirely the domain of philosophy.
Just guys in togas debating it.
Pretty much. Thinkers debated the mind practically in the dark. But as we developed rigorous, empirical ways to observe behavior, map the brain, conduct clinical trials, that philosophical debate graduated into the hard science of psychology.
Wow, okay. That makes perfect sense.
The same goes for ethics. It began as philosophical debate about good and evil, but as we codified laws, understood sociological impacts, measured human well-being aspects of it, moved into behavioral science.
So they need each other.
Yes. Al-Waily argues that philosophy without that eventual grounding in science is really just superstition. It requires a scientific anchor to be valid and to progress.
That reframes history in a really interesting way, because Al-Waily uses the ancient Greeks to illustrate this. He points out that we revere figures like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. We revere them for building these towering philosophical frameworks.
We treat them like they invented thinking.
Exactly. But they didn't just conjure those ideas out of thin air. They had to rely on the practical scientific foundations built by their neighbors.
Specifically the Babylonians and the pharaohs of Egypt.
Yes. The Greeks took existing empirical data like Babylonian astronomy and Egyptian geometry, and they used that science as the springboard to ask the deeper philosophical why questions.
That historical continuity is vital to his argument. It demonstrates that knowledge functions as a multi-generational relay race.
Handing off the baton.
Right. A society cannot simply leap into advanced philosophical enlightenment if it is still struggling with basic primitive survival. You need the scientific data of your predecessors.
The raw materials.
Exactly. The Islamic scholars in the Middle Ages provide another perfect example. They didn't isolate themselves to spark their golden age.
They actively translated the scientific and philosophical texts of the Persians, the Indians, the Greeks.
By standing on the shoulders of that inherited scientific knowledge, they were able to elevate their own intellectual and philosophical realms. Science provides the raw material, philosophy is the architecture built from it.
If that's the blueprint for how ideas evolve over time, what happens when we zoom out to the scale of an entire society?
It gets even more complex.
It does. Al Waily looks at civilization not as an abstract system, but as a living, breathing organism. He breaks it down into distinct anatomical parts.
The soul and the body.
Right. Theoretical science, which includes philosophy, literature, fine arts, the abstract ideas, that is the soul of the civilization. Practical science, the technology, infrastructure, agriculture, medicine that constitutes the body.
And his core argument is that for the organism to survive, it absolutely must cultivate both.
You can't have one without the other.
This raises an important question about how societies allocate their focus and resources. If we connect this to the bigger picture of our modern world, Al Waily warns that prioritizing one over the other inevitably leads to ruin.
So leaning too far in either direction is bad.
Very bad. Consider a society that becomes entirely obsessed with practical welfare. If the focus is purely on hyper-advanced technology, efficient infrastructure, material comfort, but there is no philosophical or artistic grounding, it leads to a profound cultural stagnation.
It loses its humanity.
It's a deadening of the human spirit. You end up with a highly efficient technological machine that has no underlying purpose, no moral compass, and no soul. The society functions, but it doesn't truly live.
But the reverse scenario is equally dangerous, right? The soul of civilization, the morality, the high art, the philosophy, desperately needs the body to survive and spread.
You can't eat a poem.
Exactly. You can have the most transcendent poetry or the most profound ethical system ever conceived, but if your population is starving, or if you lack the infrastructure to communicate those ideas, they go nowhere. They eventually die out.
They need a vehicle.
Al Waily points out how modern technology, which is purely practical and material, directly aids the theoretical. Inventions like cars, airplanes, the telephone, the radio, the printing press, they are the physical body.
Yet the printing press is what allowed the soul of civilization, its literature and philosophy, to be mass-produced and shared across the globe.
It is a deeply symbiotic relationship. The technology must serve the spirit, and the spirit must guide the technology.
And Al Waily reaches far back to ancient Babylon and Sumer to prove this is a timeless requirement for a successful society.
Because they had both.
Right. Those ancient civilizations didn't just excel in one domain. They produced the Epic of Gilgamesh, which remains a towering achievement of abstract literature and the human spirit, while simultaneously building grand, mathematically complex architecture and establishing rigorous, practical codes of law.
True civilization is the successful marriage of the material body and the spiritual soul.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Al Waily shifts from the macro scale of civilizations down to the micro scale of the individual. And he makes a claim that pushes back against a lot of our modern assumptions.
This is one of his most controversial points.
It is. He argues that an evil, educated person is a far greater tragedy and far more dangerous than an ignorant one.
Which goes against everything we're taught.
Right. Isn't the prevailing modern belief that education inherently makes us better? We tend to view education as the universal cure for societal ills. How does he justify the idea that an educated person can actually be worse?
He challenges that assumption by examining the efficiency of malice.
The efficiency of malice.
Yes. An ignorant person who commits a wrong might do so out of a lack of understanding, desperation, or mere reactive instinct. Their impact is often limited.
They might just break a window.
Exactly. But an educated individual who harbors malicious intent understands the nuances and the specific degrees of evil.
They know the system.
Because of their education, they know exactly how to manipulate complex systems. They know how to hide their tracks, exploit legal loopholes, use rhetoric to lead the ignorant astray. Their education doesn't cure their malice, it simply weaponizes it.
That is terrifying.
Furthermore, when the masses see a highly articulate, learned person acting corruptly and getting away with it, it sets a devastating precedent. It signals to the community that corruption is not only acceptable, but is a valid marker of success.
To explain how a highly educated mind can still become so corrupt, Al Waily uses an incredibly vivid metaphor. He asks us to picture the human mind as a glass lamp.
I love this analogy.
The light burning inside that lamp is aiming for the truth. It's trying to illuminate reality so we can navigate the world clearly. But our emotions act like smoke.
Clouding the glass.
Exactly. When you introduce smoke into that lamp, it coats and dims the glass. It severely clouds your judgment and distorts whatever you were looking at. And he points out that it's not just the obvious negative emotions like burning anger, jealousy, or greed that cause this smoke.
The positive ones do too.
Even positive emotions can blind us if they aren't regulated. He gives the example of feeling a misplaced sense of compassion for a highly dangerous criminal. That emotion, while stemming from a noble place of empathy, creates a thick smoke that blinds you to the greater good and the safety of the wider society.
That metaphor translates perfectly to our current information age. Think about modern digital environments and echo chambers.
Social media.
Exactly. We are constantly flooded with algorithms designed to elicit tribalism, outrage, or hypervalidation. That is a constant pumping of smoke into our collective glass lamps.
We can't see anything clearly.
Al Waily draws a very sharp distinction here between merely accumulating scientific knowledge and possessing true functional intellect. Logic is the only mechanism that can wipe the glass of that lamp clean.
So logic is the rag.
Yes. If a person is driven solely by their emotional impulses, even if they possess a PhD and a head full of advanced scientific facts, Al Waily describes them as essentially unmoored from reality.
They are completely insane in a way.
Their internal light is completely obscured. Science, without the logical, sobering regulation of the intellect, is highly volatile.
Which brings us to a really compelling comparison he makes. The brilliant scientist versus the uneducated Bedouin.
This perfectly illustrates his point.
Al Waily asks us to imagine a Bedouin living a very simple, incredibly harsh life in the desert. This person has no formal schooling, they haven't read Aristotle, they don't understand quantum physics.
But they have lived.
But through raw, grounded life experiences, they have learned the absolute value of honesty. They strictly keep their promises. They perform good deeds for their neighbors because they've observed, through logic and clear-eyed experience, that these virtues are practically beneficial and hold communities together.
It's functional wisdom.
Al Waily argues that this uneducated Bedouin, with his high functional intellect and perfectly clear moral compass, is vastly superior to a brilliant, highly trained scientist whose mind is entirely ruled by emotional impulses and who lacks any moral discipline.
It completely levels the playing field regarding how we value human worth. It strips away the illusion that academic credentials automatically equate to wisdom.
The degree isn't enough.
The Bedouin has a perfectly clean glass lamp. His light illuminates exactly what is in front of him. The volatile scientist, despite having access to a vast, complex database of facts, is operating completely in the dark because of the smoke of his unregulated emotions.
This distinction naturally forces us to question what the actual purpose of accumulating all this knowledge is in the first place.
Why do we even bother learning all this?
Let's delve into that purpose, into what Al Waily considers the actual currency of knowledge, the relationship between thinking and action. He is absolutely scathing about individuals who hoard knowledge.
He does not hold back.
To possess scientific understanding and not act upon it is compared to a billionaire who hoards vast amounts of wealth in a hidden safe, never spending a single dime to alleviate suffering.
Just sitting on a pile of money while people starve.
Al Waily calls it a despicable miserliness that completely disqualifies someone from being a true scholar. Knowledge is not meant to be static. It has to flow.
You have to move.
It must cross geographical borders and span generations to do its actual job, which is to cure poverty, to eradicate disease, and to banish human fear. He warns that if you acquire knowledge and simply sit on it, it paralyzes your mind in the exact same way an unused physical limb will eventually wither away from atrophy.
And he emphasizes that the mere accumulation of facts is totally insufficient. Memorizing scientific data or historical dates is completely useless without the application of deep, sustained thought.
Because facts aren't ideas.
Right. Al Wiley makes a fascinating observation about the actual mechanics of thinking. True thinking, the kind of synthesis that generates radical new ideas, innovations, paradigm shifts, requires a person to almost completely disconnect from their immediate physical reality.
Like tuning the world out.
You have to undergo a sort of sensory deprivation, turning inward and shutting off the noise of the present moment to allow abstract concepts to collide and form new structures in your mind.
That perfectly explains the classic trope of the absent-minded genius or the eccentric inventor.
Exactly.
We always picture them walking around, bumping into furniture, completely oblivious to what's happening in the room.
Yeah.
It's because their minds are soaring in this boundless, abstract space of imagination. They are trying to connect dots that no one else can even see yet.
They aren't in the room with us.
It takes an immense amount of cognitive energy to leave the tangible world behind and build a completely new reality inside your head.
It is an intensely demanding process. It highlights that science, or any collection of facts, is merely the raw material. Without that imaginative, often isolating and absent-minded process of deep thought, those facts remain completely inert.
They are just bricks waiting for an architect.
Yes, bricks don't build a house on their own.
So what does this all mean? How do we weigh the value of that thought against the facts themselves? Al Wiley summarizes this hierarchy beautifully with a very striking quote.
Let's hear it.
He says, "An hour of thinking leaves more room for the future than a month of science."
That is a massive statement.
It is. You could spend an entire month memorizing a dense textbook, absorbing every fact, but taking just one single hour to truly deeply think about how those specific concepts apply to a real-world problem, or how they connect to a completely different field, that is the mechanism that actually cracks the future wide open.
It establishes a very clear hierarchy of value. And he takes this ranking of human behavior even further by comparing the ultimate value of action versus science.
How so?
He clarifies that taking action without having the complete scientific picture is actually superior to having all the perfect science but taking absolutely no action.
Why? Wouldn't you make mistakes?
Because action, even if it is deeply flawed or experimental, at least has the potential to benefit someone in the real world. A rudimentary, flawed attempt at building a water filter for a village is infinitely better than a perfectly calculated engineering blueprint that never leaves a scholar's desk.
That makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, he states that the person who thinks deeply but chooses to remain silent is superior to the person who speaks endlessly without applying any thought at all.
That feels like a direct critique of our modern era,
It really does.
where everyone feels an immense, constant pressure to broadcast their every passing thought online. Silence that is born out of deep, considered thought is framed as a virtue, whereas thoughtless, reactive noise is just societal pollution.
It is a call for intellectual restraint. And all of these concepts, the danger of the educated villain, the necessity of action, the graduation of philosophy into science, they culminate in a vital lesson about human humility.
It all comes back to knowing our limits.
Al Wiley anchors his conclusion by invoking one of the most famous paradoxes in philosophical history.
Yes, the Socrates paradox. We've spent this entire deep dive discussing the massive, world-altering potential of the human mind, but Al Wiley brings us sharply back down to earth.
We don't know as much as we think we do.
Not even close. When you compare the sum total of human knowledge to the sheer infinite scale of the universe, what we actually know is severely, almost comically, limited.
This is a drop in the ocean.
He points out that we don't even fully understand the microscopic world that exists right under our noses. We are still unlocking the intricate, baffling biology of our own human bodies. We are literally walking around surrounded by mysteries we don't even have the sensory capacity to perceive.
Which is humbling.
And this is exactly why Socrates was widely considered the wisest man in ancient Athens. While all the other prominent scholars, politicians, and elites falsely paraded around acting like they knew everything, Socrates was uniquely wise because he knew that he didn't know.
He accepted his own ignorance.
He possessed the intellect to recognize the hard boundaries of his own understanding.
This is perhaps the most crucial takeaway from Al Wiley's entire framework. Confronting the vast, unending scale of our own ignorance shouldn't cause us to despair.
It shouldn't paralyze us.
Right. It shouldn't make us throw our hands up and abandon the pursuit of science or philosophy. Rather, acknowledging that massive unknown should ignite a fierce, insatiable curiosity within us.
A drive to learn more.
True wisdom isn't a destination where you finally know enough. It is an ongoing, lifelong pursuit. It demands the logical intellect to wipe the smoke from our glass lamps so we can see reality clearly. And it demands the moral grounding to actually take what little we do learn and apply it through action for the greater good rather than hoarding it away.
It's about maintaining that clean glass lamp and having the courage to actually use whatever light it provides to guide yourself and your community forward. Which brings us to a final thought for you, the learner, to mull over today.
To take with you into the world.
We've explored how hoarding knowledge is a profound form of miserliness, and how unshared, unacted upon ideas are like a paralyzed limb that eventually withers. So, looking at your own life and your own gathered experiences, what brilliant idea, what unique perspective, or what quiet realization is currently trapped inside your own mind, just waiting for you to translate it into tangible action and share it with the world?